Hello, Book 2. Here's my September wrap-up.
I got my ticket for the long way round, the one with prettiest of views.
I know I'm really late in getting this done, but I will refer you to a video I did called Apologies and Excuses. And I'll link it below and I will leave it at that. I read 10 books in September. I think it was a pretty even split between contemporary and fantasy / dystopia. I usually read more books than that, but honestly, I moved and I was solving problems and traveling and doing all kinds of things. So 10 books was not bad for me, actually, for the month. I'm just going to rattle them off and let you know what I rated them, who they're by, and if I listened to them on audio, who narrated them, and then a little bit about what I thought. So I'm going to start with the fantasy / dystopians, and I'm going to begin with Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Leigh Taylor, which I gave 5 out of 5 stars. I would have given a billion stars if there were that many to give, and it was narrated on audio by Cristin Vam. I actually started this book back last spring and tried to read it and couldn't get into it. I have no idea why, but I don't know. I thought it was, this is typical fantasy. And honestly, this is set in Prague, and I am not a fan of Eastern Europe at all. Give me a tropical island any day. Prague sounds to me like St. Petersburg in February, which I've been to St. Petersburg in February, and it was bleak and dark and freezing. And oh no, tropical island, please, please. So I think that was kind of off-putting for me about this story, but once I started getting into it, I was blown away, and I absolutely fell in love with the world, with Karu, with Akiva, with Zuzana, with Mick, with Issa, with Brimstone. Being immersed in that world was just incredible. And I have to say that probably Leigh Taylor is one of those authors that can take your heart and rip it out and stomp on it, throw against a wall, run over it with a car, dice it into tiny bits and then give it back to you and just say, there you go. My goodness, I was undone. And especially by the last, I don't know, maybe 25% of that book, the writing and the imagery is just beyond what I could tell you. That's how great it is. That's how incredible it is. It's just incredible. Let's just leave it at that. And you should read the book. The Immortal Rules by Julie Kagawa. Now that's a vampire book. I rated it 4 stars out of 5, and I listened to it on audio. It's narrated by Therese Plummer. That was a good story for a vampire book. I'm not partial to vampires. I don't like reading about them. I don't like vampires. Good story about Allie. Allie and her journey to accept who she is and who she is in light of the choices she's made. I really liked her. I really liked Kanan as her mentor. I liked Zeke. Completely fell in love with him. The story follows some people on a journey, and they get into some really horrible situations. And, I'm glad this was young adult, and it didn't get nearly as graphic as some adult books I've read. It approached it, but, vampires are vampires. Not that doesn't ever happen in young adult fiction, but I'm so thankful when it doesn't. When they don't push those limits of horror and graphic just violence. I was really glad for that. Great book, great story. I read All Our Yesterdays by Cristin Terrill, gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I read it in print, and I think I will only say one thing, and that is time travel. Done really well. I read TheDarkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. I gave that 5 out of 5 stars, and on audio that was narrated by Amy McFadden. The thing about that story was that I would put it down, like I would, come back to it and start listening again, having been worried about the characters. I would worry, are they okay? Do they have enough to eat? Are they warm? Are they hanging out with the right crowd? It was just, for Alexandra Bracken to draw that out of me as a reader, well, that's pretty good trick. Pretty good trick. Great story. And oh my gosh, heart-wrenching ending. Oh my gosh, I felt so terrible for these characters, but I knew that that's how it had to be. So Hopefully things will pick up and get wonderful again and never fade. I read Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. I gave that one 4 out of 5 stars, and that's narrated on audio by Lauren Fortgang. That's the second book in the Grisha series. Again, set with that Russian flavor, that Eastern European flavor, but that's fantasy, and I loved it. I got completely drawn in and carried along by these characters and this story, and I loved it. I just loved it. Now, on to the contemporaries. I read Lucid by Adrienne Stoltz and Ron Bass. On audio, that's narrated from 2 points of view by Emma Galvin and Jessica DeChico. I love Emma Galvin. And I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. This book is narrated from 2 points of view simply because it's 2 girls who, when they go to sleep at night, they dream they're the other girl. So it's a really fascinating premise, and it was a really well done story, told really well, kind of like a movie. It just flowed along like a television show or a movie. And I think that's probably because the authors are screenwriters. And that book hasn't really gotten a lot of hype, and I think it just went through a cover change. So I'm hoping it gets a lot more popular because it's a really good story and it's really well written. I read The Edge of Never by J.A. Redmerski. That's narrated on audio by Lauren Fortgang, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really loved it. Cameron and Andrew go on a road trip, and it was just delightful, the banter between the two of them. Now, this is new adult, so be aware. That just the relationship between the two people was really great. I did have a slight problem with this. This pretty young 20-something girl gets on a bus, on a Greyhound bus, going somewhere, no particular destination in mind, by herself. Now that just sounds a little bit unsafe / reckless / stupid / what are you thinking / maybe I should do that. I might have done that when I was 20. I might do it today, but the point being that doesn't make it any less reckless or any less safe. So, that, I just didn't like that part. But, it made for a great story. And who doesn't want to get up and just leave their life and go on a road trip? Yeah. So that it's complete fiction. And I have to say that Andrew, the other main character in the book, calls her on it and says, Cameron, what are you doing? Why are you trusting me? I could be an axe murderer. I could be a serial killer. And so they worked that out, but I was really glad that was brought up. So it's a really, really good story. Ends up being kind of a shocker ending that you don't really see coming, but then you think later that was pretty smart of the author to do that. So then I read 10 Tiny Breaths by K.A. Tucker on audio. That was narrated by Elizabeth Louise, and I gave that 4 out of 5 stars. Again, new adult. That's a pretty interesting story about appearances and how they are not always what they seem. It's about a 20-something girl and her younger sister who's in high school, and they've been orphaned, and they live with family, and then that situation becomes something that they don't want to be in. So she grabs her sister, I forget her name, but she grabs her sister and runs off to Florida. Now, she's a very resourceful person in that she finds an apartment complex with a furnished apartment and gets a job at like a Starbucks. And the people that live in the complex are questionable people. I mean, they just are. And yet, appearances can be deceiving. And so she gets involved with a whole crew of people that you would not think were the most savory of characters, and yet they are really wonderful people. This story has a lot of serious issues. And towards the end of the book, they get really complicated and they get really messy. And they're dealt with very well. And then there's kind of this little fairy tale ending tacked onto the end, which I really wanted. Okay, it's fiction. And of the new adult stuff that's out there, I have to say this is one of the better ones. Bittersweet by Sarah Ocklar. On audio, that's narrated by Adrienne Myra. Adrienne Myra. Say that 10 times. I gave that 4 out of 5 stars, and it's a very cute little story. The book synopsis kind of leads you to believe that it's about cupcakes. And it's really not. This girl uses baking cupcakes in her mother's diner as a way to cope, kind of a stress reliever. But the book really isn't about cupcakes as much as it's about ice skating. And this girl, she feels trapped. She wants out of this small town. She sees a way out, and then it's all the things she has to do to achieve that. And along the way, she begins to discover things about herself that she didn't think were true, but actually are true. So it's a very sweet little story and a very light read, and kind of a winter book instead of a summer read. It's not a beach read. It's a sit by the fire and drink hot chocolate kind of a read. And then lastly, I read Hourglass by Myra McEntire. I got that on my Kindle, and I only gave that 3 out of 5 stars. The reason I picked it up was because it's about time travel. Now, this is one of those classic situations where you have the great murder mystery and you have the idea of time travel or superheroes. And then you put them together and they make a huge mess because the main character is such a jerk. I did not care for her at all. A lot of people would probably say she's sarcastic and saucy in a funny kind of a way, but I didn't find her that way. I thought she was just annoying. She was just irritating. She didn't take the advice of anybody that cared about her. She kind of went her own way and was kind of like, you're all crazy, I'm going to do what I want. And it just didn't flow. Now, this is a trilogy, the Hourglass trilogy, and I think the second book is called Timepiece, and I think I am going to pick that up and read it because it's about a secondary character, and I really liked that secondary character. And now that I know it's got the superhero aspect of it having to do with time travel, then I know that going in. I didn't know that going in with Hourglass, and that kind of threw me because I prefer my time travel with a lot of science and physics that explain it. And you really didn't get that in this story. I just didn't care for it. I'm hoping this sequel is better. So that's it for September. That's all the books I read, and I'm not going to do a TBR for October because I'll just deviate from it, and I'm just OCD enough to be bugged when I do that. So I've already read about 10 books so far in October, and there are some sequels coming out like Allegiant and Never Fade, which I already have on audio. I'm going to listen to probably tonight. And also the sequel to Cruel, which is Altered by Jennifer Albin, comes out this month. Now that was an amazing book because it was just so inventive. So that's it for now. I will see you next time, and thanks as always for watching.
It's got mountains, it's got rivers, it's got sights, give you shivers, but it sure would be prettier with you when I'm gone. When I'm gone, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You're gonna miss me by my walk, you're gonna miss me by my talk. Oh, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone.